The MoneroTopia Price Report segment is sponsored by Exolix, a privacy-focused, non-custodial instant crypto exchange. Go to exolix.com to enjoy secure and completely anonymous swaps with no KYC or sign-up. Swap between Monero and 2,000 plus assets at the most competitive rates and with no limits. Exolix.com, your fast and secure way to privacy.
It's going well, man. It's going well. How you doing?
Good. Just enjoying the zoo, the circus.
Yeah.
Clown world.
I'm waiting for this big dip. Like I want to see some mega dip in Bitcoin.
I don't know if you
that'd
do
be fun.
traditional investments, but yeah, the S&P went back down. People are getting kind of worried. Nothing major still. Like nothing's broken just yet, but sitting waiting patiently. We'll see if it comes or not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll hear all about it. But if the floor falls through there, then it's definitely falling through on crypto as well, right? I mean, I'm sure you'll get to all that.
Yeah. You gotta believe that would be the case.
I mean, if anything could hold Monero, not that it won't go down, but it will have a solid floor at some right, like at 112 or whatever it is. Like, it's not Monero is or it might I'm sure you'll get into.
Dude, 100 flat was that very, very, very solid price floor after the Binance listing last year. It would not go.
Yeah, it
wouldn't stick below 100. So that was.
Yeah, without like some kind of nuclear economic whatever, like it's hard to think Monero's going to go anywhere below 100.
Yeah.
And now I think it wouldn't go below. I mean, I'm sure Body could pull some charts that would maybe play into where it might level off to, but.
Yeah, man, I could do some astrology. I could read the leaves, tell you where the floor could be. Yeah.
Yeah. An Arctic always says that if Monero is going to when Monero climbs against Bitcoin, it's going to be in a bear market. I think that's a pretty good theory.
Yeah, I mean, we're on a pretty sustained pullback here for crypto and for Bitcoin and Monero. Just it's not exactly making new highs, but I mean, it's kind of a stable coin at its new center point of like 215.
We shall see. Tell us all about it.
All
wait,
right,
we do have a comment here. Is this for Knockery tip 25 cents at 1 cent per transaction to double the transaction amount in June per day, which implies plus 30,000 transactions is just $300. By the way, a bunker phone may have been upgraded, which was presented on the show. Long live open hardware without the Intel ME or AMD PSP. What's a bunker phone? By the way, a bunker phone may have been upgraded, which was presented on the show. I don't know what that is. But yeah, I mean, good point. If everybody just sent like mini transactions, we could pump transaction count that way. Wouldn't cost more than a couple $100.
It would be nice if we could get some CPUs that weren't backdoored with the Intel ME, as you mentioned. I mean, you can get an old laptop before that came along, but yeah, the Intel management engine, it's like, I mean, it's supposed to be like this trusted computing startup to make sure that you're not getting like firmware backdoored, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of a black box, and hypothetically they could use it to just take over your
At this point, I would strongly argue you're doing more harm to your own security by trying to disable those things for modern computers than to just leave them on. There's a lot of important firmware security features that come from those, and yeah, some of them are black boxes. It's not ideal, but that's just the way it is.
What is this bunker phone he's talking about? Tux, what
I have no idea. I've never heard of this.
Bunker phone.
Sidetrack.
As far as the ME, are you talking about like Spectre and Meltdown, like attacks like that, where?
No, just like things like having a proper secure enclave, verified boot, things like that that utilize these small chips now. Because like the PSP, like the AMD PSP, and nowadays Intel ME are part of like a larger system that includes like a TPM and does other tasks in a more secure way. But yeah, I mean, there's some, they can be black boxes, and there's like like Intel's had like undocumented instructions on their CPUs before, like unsurprisingly, and they don't disclose the source code for, like the OS that Intel ME is running on, stuff like that. So it just depends.
It's one of those things that, like, I mean, my personal, my personal opinion, I guess, or kind of whack opinion, whatever. There probably is backdoors in that shit. Like, they could probably take over just about any CPU, but it probably takes some really dedicated level of attack or penetration by the deep state to actually do that. Like, it's not like they've just backdoored everyone's stuff simultaneously, casually, dragnet. It's probably more like, yeah, they could do it, but it's not exactly easy. So they'd have to basically target you hardcore to do it.
Potentially, but if you're thinking about it in that way, you have way more. You've got way more to worry about in the user space than being concerned about some very low level component potentially pwning you. Like if this is actually your threat model, you've got a lot of work to do in the user space to really lock that down. Then before it's even worth being super concerned about some low level component that you don't have any control over.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, that's a sidetrack. Please take it away, Body.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we're looking here at the Monero price. We're looking at the 4-hour. You can see that after a couple months of upward movements, we don't really look at the 4-hour too much here. So I want to show you guys the little bit more near term. So basically, we're going to be range bound here in this area for some time. Most likely, I mean, again, all bets are off if things decide to go whack, if they decide to go crazy. But overall, you might be able to trade this range now. You'll notice we got up into the very near term upper standard deviation bands. If we get back down here, then you could probably go long on that and maybe just trade some of that oscillation. That seems overall in Monero trading the narrow range, right? Monero has been fairly range bound for years now. So generally speaking, trading the range has been quite the profitable proposition if you're so inclined to trade Monero. So yeah, if if you're worried about Monero's price, don't be. We're crushing it, or at least we're stable. We're back to our stable coin levels, just a bump higher. That's all. So yeah, good things there. You can see that in the Bitcoin versus Monero ratio. We're on our way up here as well, basically setting new, maybe not local highs, but bumping up against those same highs. Overall, this looks like this looks like a bullish chart, guys. Like, this actually really does look pretty good. You've got the near-term bands that are still holding quite well, right? So these are the upper standard deviation bands, and those guys. Let's go down to the 4-hour. This would make more sense on the 4-hour. There we go. Yeah, so you have the somewhat longer term bands that have acted as a little bit of a capping spot, a little bit of resistance area, but you still see the more short term upper standard deviation bands in blue, and basically that is continuing to hold. It's continuing to provide this sort of like channel for Monero to have this like upward movement against Bitcoin. So right now, I would still expect a little bit of consolidation, but it's kind of like consolidation that's knocking up against that glass ceiling. Not to imply that Monero has a glass ceiling, but maybe it does. Right, so maybe something like this, a little bit of consolidation towards the upside, and then perhaps a break. Right, just looking at in a purely technical sense, that's kind of what I might expect for the ratio here on Monero versus Bitcoin. Realistically, when we incorporate some of the other stuff here, I'm not super duper confident that that's how things have to play out. But if you just wanted to use the technical tool that we're using and use it in isolation, you could do that, and there definitely is some merit to using technical tools in isolation. You just take the emotion out of it, you take the human element out of it, and then you just say, okay, I'm just going to trade algorithmically, and people can have success with that, especially if you stick to your rules and you have a market profile or a market regime that supports your current level. The thing about algorithmic trading that trips people up is that usually it breaks down during like major market changes, right? Big, massive changes in the regime. So for example, if you're in a bear market and you're algorithmic trading successfully, well, if that stops and reverses going into a bull market, well, you might have to adjust your algos. Obviously, things like macro crashes and other major adjustments to the economy can sort of break your assumptions that were causing good algorithmic trading for you. Anyways, that's a little bit of a side trail there. I I mean, I imagine that probably most likely Monero is going to find effectively it's going to do some consolidation, continuing at this current level with a little bit of upside kind of pressure towards it. So I do expect we'll probably see the ratio climbing just a little bit, little by little, until we get any kind of real breakage or movement in the larger markets. I would expect this chart to continue to be moderately bullish. When it comes to the XMR Ethereum ratio, I don't even know why we should look at Ethereum anymore. I mean, personally, I think the chain does a lot of stuff. There's vastly more wrapped Bitcoin traded on Ethereum layer 2s than is traded in Bitcoin layer 2s. So Ethereum actually does vastly more volume and has a whole lot more stuff in ecosystem than Bitcoin does. Yet Bitcoin has the price. And so that's kind of like one of those things that you got to say, all right, the maximalist, it sounds like y'all had at least one thing, right? You know, you had your price, and we all know that they hang their hat on price, right? They hang their hat on having the number go up. And it's like, okay, well, you know, where's the usefulness, guys? Where's all this stuff you promised us? Anyways, Monero's doing quite well versus Ethereum lately. Let's go to the weekly, this chart, get a bit more context. Realistically, you know, we're not, you know, we could be doing better, right? I've seen better. I'd like to be up here. I'd like to be another 2 to 3x higher in Monero price versus Ethereum, which would put us at about $600, maybe $700, which is probably where our price really should be. Absent the fuckery and all the crazy stuff, you know, the attacks against the price that we have talked about for so long, fractional reserve, delistings, etc. But it is what it is, you know, and you fight the battles as best you can. And you know, I think it forced us all to keep a strong will and a good head and proper vision over what we're doing here and what the point of all this is. Let's see. I guess we could look at the Monero dominance. Sure, why not? Monero dominance doing pretty good. Again, doing that consolidation kind of thing in the upper standard deviation bands. This is almost the same chart as a Bitcoin dominance, or sorry, as Monero versus Bitcoin, especially since Bitcoin dominance continues to dominate. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what flavor of listener you are. I know some of you guys are more of the Bitcoin persuasion, and some of you guys are more of the not Bitcoin persuasion. Personally, right now, I'm kind of the not Bitcoin persuasion. It's just annoying that it's not useful. It's like, okay, why is it getting all? Why should we be happy about market cap and mind share going to this coin that is not useful for actual digital freedom money? Like, it's a speculative asset. Okay, great. There's a lot of speculative assets, and okay, there's some freedom involved there. I'm glad it exists. It's better that it exists than not exist. But like, where's the actual usefulness for the world except for adding to corporate balance sheets and speculating that your bags go higher? Like, can we actually get some real usefulness? Whatever. Yet I digress. Okay, let's go to the Monero transaction counts. We're basically sitting here the same as we always have, just below that 30K number. I also added the Zcash transaction counts in here. There's been, as Doug and Tux noted early on the show, there has been some infighting and consternation between the privacy community and the quote unquote privacy community. I'm just playing Zcash. Obviously, they're the one in quotes. Yeah, I mean, they don't really have a whole lot of transactions. You know, this is kind of one of those externalities. You could say, listen, there's no reason why there couldn't be more transactions on Zcash. There's no reason why there couldn't be more shielded transactions on Zcash. There just aren't. And I think it's, you know, obviously it's the whole history behind everything. It's like, guys, you know, it just didn't, like, there was just too much corporate, too much sus, too much, you know, I could tolerate a little bit of that, but it seems like they took it too far. You know, it's like, I can deal with a pre-mine if you want to do like a 5% pre-mine. I can be like, all right, you know, you got to develop the coin somehow. And even though Monero was strong enough and awesome enough to figure out how to do it without a pre-mine, and proves that it can be done, I could still understand a little tiny pre-mine, but I can't understand a 20% dev tax ad infinitum in perpetuity. So that's kind of problematic. Anyways, so yeah, I mean, okay, Zcash transactions sitting here about like just above 2,000, like 2,500 maybe. And I don't know how many of those are actually shielded. I don't know how those numbers may have changed. If anyone wants to sing out and tell me what's up with that. All right, let's see. Oh, we can check the hash rate too. Let's undo Zcash and then we go to the hash rate. How many gigas are we getting today? Man, it's doing this. All right, whatever. Okay, so we're looking at about 4 giga hashes per day. Spiking up all the way to about 4.5, at least according to this chart. I know some other charts measure it slightly different and have like slightly different numbers, but ish, this is the number ish. So cool, good stuff. Privacy altcoins. Yeah, I don't want to call them shitcoins. They're not doing very good. They're all kind of falling. Let's see here. I guess Zcash actually is doing the best in the past week as of the last price report that we did. It's made a little bit of a bump up here. Maybe some of that extra attention that they're getting on Twitter has caused a little bit of some of these green candles here. So yeah, but not really doing too much. Let's see. Let's actually measure that. Wow, 30%. Man, this coin oscillates like crazy. Like if you want to trade, this is probably not a terrible coin to trade. That's a 30% increase this week. Oh yeah, now I get it. That one dude, I won't mention his name because I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm like, all right, it seems like he's shilling. I don't know why he's being so contentious about all of it, but he is. Anyways, he was like, oh yeah, Zcash has gone up X amount in the past month, and Monero hasn't. That's like, okay, bro. Like, but then why don't you look at the full history and why don't you like contextualize that analysis instead of cherry picking to try and make a point? Like, I don't know, whatever. Anyways, let's see. I'll show you Xano. I said I promised I would stop commenting on this. I promised myself more than anybody that I would stop commenting on Xano, but I will still show you the chart. I'll still show you the wave magic. You guys can draw your own conclusions from what this chart looks like and what kinds of plans of mice and men might be made here in the trading of this chart. Maybe Roger's watching and maybe he's determining if he's going to sell more bags or not. I don't know. Just kidding, bro. I have no idea what your bags look like in Xano. Anyways, there's the Xano chart. Thero not doing so great either. Pirate Chain, it's just kind of like waddling downwards effectively. Yeah, okay, whatever. Just really not much to be said about those charts. Let's go to the overall crypto markets. We'll start with the Z scores because Z scores have a little bit more cause for celebration. You'll notice Monero, we had a light up movement this past week, but the rest of crypto kind of went up and then down. But Monero went more up than down. So our Z scores overall are looking better than the rest of the market, which are all below zero at this point, at least from the 100-day perspective, right? So this is a 100. We're doing a calculation back 100 candles. We're on the daily, so technically this is a 100-day look back, and we're comparing each asset to how it's doing relative to its own moving average. So it centers around zero, and then you use the standard deviation to determine how well it's doing relative to its own moving average. So Z-score is a very common thing to use in all types of processes where you have to compare disparate numbers and you want to overlay them and see them together. So yeah, Monero overall, relatively speaking, doing better than everything else. Bitcoin doing actually shockingly what I what I predicted it would do last week, sort of off the cuff. When I was like, I don't know, let me just give you some random prediction here. I basically predicted we'd come up to the top of the lower standard deviation band. And then have troubles and pull back. So basically, that's exactly what happened. We hit the 89,000 level pretty much, and then pulled back. So Bitcoin's sitting right here now. That's definitely good for probably a swing long. I don't know for how long that would be a good swing long, but that doesn't. I mean, the way that this structure here is set up on the Wave Magic, this thing doesn't have to hold for very long. Like Bitcoin could totally break down from here pretty easily. I don't think necessarily it's going to break down from here immediately. We have 2 days of weekend before the markets open for everything else. And obviously, since now Bitcoin is basically a BlackRock asset traded with ETFs and normies on the stock market, obviously there's a big factor there, a much larger factor for normal trading hours than in the past. Anyways, yeah, this is according to quote unquote Wave Magic, which is again this like standard deviation overlay that I've told you guys about over and over again, and was very, very reticent to even share. Honestly, like it was like a year I had this and I just wouldn't share it because it's fucking magic. It really is, guys. Anyways, bounced off exactly where do you expect. This thing is going to have maybe a little bit of bounce. Who knows to where? Maybe the moving average cluster. Maybe not. Let's drop into a little bit lower time frames and maybe I can give you some more tea leaves, crystal ball predictions here. Tell you exactly what's going to happen. No, that's not really useful. Let's go down to the 5 minute. All right. I don't know if you guys want to put in some 5 minute trades. Maybe you can make some profit before the end of the show. Yeah. Okay. So this thing is basically done with its down movement temporarily from the 5 minute context. But this thing could still come back up to the upside. Yeah. So this swing trade is in play. If you manage to catch it, at the very bottom, it's hard to catch things at the very bottom. No, I don't have any opinions. All right, we'll stop doing stupid 5 minute charts. How degenerate can we be? All right, let's go to Bitcoin dominance. This thing is actually still in this upward channel. It pretended it was going to break down I had my fingers crossed. It was time for alt season, and it never came. Alt season has basically left us the crying Doge. Doge crying with his tears, with his salty tears. Buff Doge is now deflated. There are no altcoins. They're all dying. Bitcoin is crushing everything, a la BlackRock and the others. This is also continues to look like a bullish chart. This continues to make like bullish developments like this here on the short term, at least. That's kind of like a rising wedge. This thing feels like it's about to break towards the upside. Do that, and then maybe do that or something. So it's still on the larger context. Let's go to like the 3-day chart. I don't want to go to the weekly because it's a little bit too long. But on the 3-day chart, on the larger context, you can see that this is the first time that Bitcoin has actually visited these upper standard deviation levels. Typically with these charts, what you'll see is some big washout, consolidation, reversal, whatever. You typically are not going to come to the just from the purely TA standpoint, right? Just purely from the wave magic analysis. You're typically not going to come straight to these bands and then immediately beat them and start going to the heavens, right? And I know that's what all the Bitcoin maximalists wish would happen, hyper Bitcoinizations, which probably is never going to happen, especially since you can't actually do any transactions on the chain. But you don't really expect this chart to just like come here and then smash towards the upside and then keep going forever. Like at best, it'll spike up above here, like wick above here, and then come back down, consolidate some more, and then go up. But and if we have a big macro crash, you could probably expect something like that would happen. Like you actually do expect to get to wick above this chart because people are going to flee to the safety, quote unquote, safety of Bitcoin, at least relative to altcoins. That's what's going to happen. That's basically what happens in macro crashes, right? People flee to safety or whatever they think is going to be the safety. So let's see here. Let's talk about Ethereum versus Bitcoin. So I just want to highlight how wrong I was on this fucking chart. So maybe this thing can come back at some point. Like it hasn't set lower lows relative to the last bear market. So it's actually still here, potentially could set a low down here and then move back towards the upside. But at this point, it's difficult to think that Ethereum is going to be able to gain market cap parity with Bitcoin if we get a presumed bull market, right? It just seems unlikely, very unlikely at this point. You've got Solana where a lot of like the market cap degeneracy flows into meme coins and just nonsense. So Sol has stolen a lot of what Ethereum used to handle in that regard. People just wanted to put their memes on chain. That's, I think, ultimately that's the answer here. Like that is the answer. Is that in the last bull market, people like I can't remember what it was called, but there was like some major, is it something ocean? It's not DigitalOcean, something ocean. Doesn't matter. People were putting memes onto somebody else's server and then having some number that is like peripherally related to the hash by some signature. And people, that was too esoteric. It was too abstract. It was too retarded. It was too autistic, even for the autists that love meme coins. So ultimately, what people realized is they wanted to put their memes on chain, especially once we got ordinals and people were like, wait, I can smash those memes directly onto Bitcoin. But you're like Ethereum doesn't support that because Ethereum actually supports layer 2 ecosystems, which are massive now. They're like billions and billions and billions of dollars. Like that's what Ethereum is doing. They're actually a solid chain for supporting layer 2s, but nobody wants to put their memes on layer 2. They want to put it on layer 1. So that's why you got Solana. Solana sucked a lot of that degenerate market cap from Ethereum. That's just it is what it is, guys. And I missed it. So I just want to highlight that again. I don't think I can even 50% say now at this point that Ethereum is going to come back, is going to make market cap parity with Bitcoin in the next bull market. So yeah, so I mean, it'll come back. It'll still do pretty good. You could probably expect it to get back to near its, the previous all-time high of the bull market, depending on how badly this sell-off continues. It's been pretty bad. So anyways, yep, just covering that for you guys. One thing I wanted to do actually was Bitcoin versus gold. So BTC USD divided by USD. Yep. Okay, so we're on the weekly here. Let's go to the daily. Daily would look better. Or maybe daily would not look better. Let's go to the 3D. Yeah, all right. Yeah, we haven't looked at Bitcoin versus gold for a while, and the reason we're looking at this obviously is that gold is just on a tear. Like gold is just crushing it. It's just really, really crushing it. So yeah, here we go. Here we have let's just look from the last peak, the last bull market until now. Let's see here. Sorry, charts being slow. I don't know if you guys can see this. I don't think I have the right wave magic on there. Yeah, there we go. Those lines are brighter. Hopefully you guys can see that now. Okay. So effectively, what we have, Bitcoin relative to gold, has kind of just barely put on a new all-time high, but only marginally, right? Let's take a little measurement there. And you can see that Bitcoin has only outperformed gold to about 9 or 10% from the last bull market, from the last peak, the last top. It's still, like, generally speaking, this is still a bullish chart. So you would still say that technically speaking, Bitcoin has momentum versus gold to continue, trying to rise. But it's funny because everyone's like Bitcoin is an inflation hedge. Gold has been quite the inflation hedge lately as well. Although it's interesting because if we look at gold versus the S&P, it's actually just like holding steady. Like those two charts are just equal now. So gold is going up the same as the S&P, relatively about the same as much as Bitcoin. Not quite as much, obviously, because Bitcoin has the volatility. But overall, like gold has been, at least from the 2021, 2022 era, gold has been about as good an inflation hedge as Bitcoin over very long time frames. So I found that interesting. I was just looking at this chart. Um, I don't know if this tells you if you should buy gold or Bitcoin at the current moment. Probably it kind of tells you it doesn't really matter. Um, so wouldn't it be funny? Like, okay, let me propose this. Wouldn't it be funny if Bitcoin actually ended up just being an inflation hedge and not the speculative asset? Because that's what you hear all the time. They're always like, it's an inflation hedge, and what they're really saying is it's a speculative asset that goes up a shitload in value, and someone else will buy your bags at a much higher price. That's what they're really saying. But they say it's inflation hedge. Wouldn't it be hilarious if the speculative component came out of Bitcoin because it's finally peaking out on its speculative usage, and instead just becomes an inflation hedge like gold, right? A counter risk kind of asset. In which case, Bitcoin would go up about the same amount as gold does. And you would see a lot of cope. I hope that happens. That would be funny. It could actually become digital gold, maybe. It's still not fungible, so it probably actually couldn't. But just playing with some ideas there. Okay, let's go to the macro. Let's check out what's happening with the macro. We'll start with oil because we've been starting with oil. It still had its kind of like run up here, and it's kind of got stopped out at the obvious level, right? The effectively this area here, this uptrend area right here. It's basically fell out of trend, came up here to test the underside of it. I suppose I would predict, along the macro crash, that this thing is now going to come back to the downside. That would be a very clear sign if you see early next week, if this thing comes down, or anytime next week, if this thing comes down to the downside and starts doing that. What could drive that? Trump is going to have a big announcement. Actually, he's announced an announcement, so he's like definitely on the crypto train at this moment. He has announced the announcement that on Wednesday, April 2nd, not April 1st, doesn't want to fool the market or anything, April 2nd, he is going to announce a new round of reciprocal tariffs. Now, what that means exactly is anybody's guess, because if you just naively and blindly implement reciprocal tariffs, okay, so China charges us X amount of tariffs, so we're going to charge China X amount on tariffs. Well, what China's going to do is ship those goods to some other country first, slap, I don't know, some other country label on it, and then ship it to the United States for lower tariffs, right? That's how that's going to happen. So, I don't know how maybe they intend to get around that. And that happens with a lot of goods, guys. Like when you see, like, there's so much shit that's like made from here, like olive oil from, I don't know, the Sicily. A lot of times it's like olive oil made in Greece or Spain or somewhere, and then they ship it, they bottle it in Sicily, and then they say product of Sicily, right? And it's like the whole product of thing is fairly ambiguous, so it doesn't tell you necessarily. Anyways, yet I digress. The point is that we're all wondering. Everyone's asking, okay, what do you mean reciprocal tariffs? What exactly are you going to implement? How harsh is this going to be for America and the global economy? And so the question is here, if there are significant tariffs that get implemented, you have to expect somewhat of a slowdown in the global economy. And if there's a slowdown in shipping, that requires less oil. And if it requires less oil, what do you think that might do to the price of oil? Yeah. So depending on how harsh and severe things might be, on Wednesday we could potentially see a reversal here in oil, and that would make a lot of sense. The other thing too to think about, that like at the risk of believing the geopolitical stage too much, hypothetically, if you wanted to force Putin and Russia back to the table to like do some kind of peace treaty with Ukraine, what do you need? You need to hit them economically, because you can't really hit them with bombs. We don't really do that anymore. But if you crush the price of oil and Putin's currency, the ruble, doesn't have right? It has much less value because Russia's currency is significantly based on oil. They're an oil exporter, massive oil economy, and raw materials in general. If you have a lower price of oil, that's going to hit their currency pretty hard and make it difficult for them, and he might be forced to come back to the table. So again, kind of at the risk there of taking that geopolitical stage, of giving it credence. I give it about half credence, right? Like there's real things happening there geopolitically. On the other hand, they're also kind of in these back rooms sometimes, like making these negotiations and like, hey, I don't know, I have some old military equipment. You have old military equipment. It's about to be decommissioned. Why don't we just have ourselves a little proxy skirmish for a few years, get rid of the old shit, then we can like justify new budgets to do new shit, and we can play with our new toys and whatnot. Like that kind of shit really does happen, guys. Like it's I just cannot believe that they're like deals like that aren't made, but they're also still competing for power, right? Again, frenemies. That's what's going on here. So yeah, those are kind of factors that could affect the oil price. I know that's kind of long-winded. Hopefully that's, again, it's just context, right? I'm just trying to give you guys like things to think about, context, how does stuff interleave together, interwork together in the economy. Right now, this pattern would suggest, just from a tea leaf standpoint, just from a TA standpoint, this should go down next week. That's kind of what I would expect. Let's take a look at the wave magic here and see if it reveals anything to us. I don't think. Yeah, I mean, this is basically a downtrend, right? The wave magic is basically downtrending. So you can see the very long-term bands here, the lower standard deviation bands, they're already floating towards the downside. You have the secondary short-term bands that are also kind of meandering towards the downside. This gives you a channel to kind of like basically do something like that. So that's oil right there. And again, if you're seeing, and we talked about this before, we'll say it again. Let's go back to, let's get rid of the wave magic. And let's get rid of these lines. Sorry. I know I hate dead space, right? Dead space is no good. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about this right here. This is yellow zone. We're still in the yellow zone. It's like, hey, shit's like, be careful. Like, just be aware. Shit could be going down soon. And down here is red zone. This is like, hey, shit's actually about to go down. Sell your positions, get short, right? So again, if you see below $60 on oil, if you see multiple daily closes happening down there below $60, that's your sign that, hey, things are probably actually like starting to really, truly break down. Until then, it's still kind of like, yeah, maybe not, right? Like you could, hypothetically, things might not be quite breaking down yet in the yellow zone. So anyways, hopefully that makes sense for you guys. Going to reverse repos now. Again, this is money parked with the Federal Reserve overnight, just to give you a bigger, broader picture. Here's what happened with the bear market. Going back to 2021, you can see the reverse repos. People were parking money into the safety of the Federal Reserve, the overnight Federal Reserve, and getting the overnight Federal Reserve funds rate, right? So about 4.5% right now. Back then it was lower, but people were parking money with the Federal Reserve back in 2021, even as the bull market was still on, right? Even as new higher highs were being made, you were getting shitloads of money, smart money, getting out of risk and getting into safety of parking money with the Fed. And this has significantly fueled the bull market that we've seen over the course of the past few years. So right now, what we had talked about is that, again, if you're starting to see an uptrend, if you're starting to see institutions get fearful and start to move money into reverse repos, that's a negative sign for the economy, right? That's a negative sign that, hey, things could be getting ready for a crash, right? Because smart money moves before dumb money. So we finally seen something that actually does look like an uptrend here. We have an uptrend more or less confirmed. It's not super strong. It's still short term. It's just a few months, but again, we're looking, will this keep going towards the upside? Are we going to see a real sustained uptrend? Over the next week or so, seeing a real sustained uptrend is a sign that yes, the macro crash is on, or at least negativity in general is on, and that you really need to be looking to protect yourself. Okay, so those are I guess two main signals there that we look at a lot. There's nothing to look at for the dollar index. I just don't see anything that's super useful telling us about the macro all that much. But gold, I mean, holy crap, gold is just crushing it, guys. Gold is continuing to ride these purple bands to victory. Things are looking really, really solid for gold. We're actually starting to really getting pretty close to the very large area that I've talked about for a while. So basically $3,500 gold. This is such a headliner issue. Headliner spot. It would be really hard for me to not sell a significant chunk of gold at $3,500. Now, with the way things are going, maybe you could just bust through that level. It very much could, I suppose. I do feel like we are kind of in this moment that sort of resembles the 1970s and 80s, where they had the inflation and gold was floating, and and then gold had this massive reevaluation. And then you've also got, I mean, think about it too. You've got a lot of the MAGA people, a lot of the conservatives, and the libertarians already like gold, but you've got a lot of MAGA conservatives that are like realizing the value of gold, right? Like I've seen it in normies, and they're like, yeah, they like the gold. So anyways, yeah, that's gold continuing to perform. Going to continue to let my gold ride, not doing anything here just yet. And then in the more near term and a little bit shorter term picture, again, we're looking to tag this purple band that continues to rise. Currently, that sits at about 3,200. So that's probably like right here is a spot that I would probably think about maybe selling some gold again. Always depends on how things look once you get there in real time. Always depends on like what does the rest of the situation look like once we tag this spot. Maybe the United States decides to print a shitload of money, right? And you're like, well, hey, gold's going to continue to perform. Maybe it'll do that, right? But anyways, yeah, the point is I'm still long gold. I don't see why you should sell here. I think you should just continue keeping that long in play. Looking really good right there. It seems to be also acting counter-cyclically, not counter-cyclically. It seems to be acting as a risk hedge, right? It's actually being risk. It's a risk-off asset again, finally, kind of. At least along the short term. And what I mean by that is that we can go here to the S&P 500, and you see that, yeah, the S&P 500 is dropped off by about 10%, almost 11%. It made a little comeback last week, but then in the last 3 days, it came back down. And the reason is, again, it's probably the Trump tariffs, reciprocal tariffs announcement on Wednesday. That's probably like the reason. Basically, investors don't want to be holding risk into the weekend. They're worried about what could happen. You know, they it's too risky for them. So like the market made a rebound, and they said, okay, that's good. We had a little bit of profits here short term. Let's sell that shit and limit our risk going into the weekend, going into Monday, going into April Fools, just in case anyone wants to pull a fast one on the markets. So yeah, things came back to the downside, both the S&P and the NASDAQ, and also for Bitcoin, as we saw. So yeah, people are worried. Like there really is a real fear in the market about, you know, is this it? And again, that's a justified fear, because where is the liquidity going to come from to pump these markets higher and higher? You know, a lot of it was built on the AI craze. A lot of it's built on these new loans created for these AI companies. And then DeepSeek comes along and like just crushes crushes the notion of how many GPUs that you need to actually train these things. And so suddenly there's this question over, do you really need that many GPUs and need that much compute resources? What's going to happen to all these loans? Here's another thing, guys. Every time we see a new, and this is a broader perspective, every time we see some new technology, some new big thing hit the market, you get massive expansion, let a million flowers bloom, and then you get some sort of big crash that wipes everything out, and everything gets consolidated to some small set of corporations to control that. And you have a shitload of AI companies trying to do a whole bunch of cool stuff and you know, launch their thing, whatever. And at some point, you know, there needs to be a destruction, right? A creative destruction. It's probably how the Keynesians would think of this. A creative destruction of all the companies and all the bad investment and all the bad loans, and that needs to get wiped out, and everyone needs to get afraid so that you know, Sam Altman and a few other players can consolidate the market, and that way they can more easily control things. That seems to be like, that doesn't seem to be, that is the pattern that we've seen across all these different industries. It happened with the .com and the internet. It's just continued to happen. So yeah, that's again just more things to think about there. Where's liquidity going to come from? It does make sense to sort of consolidate a lot of these AI companies and watch them go bankrupt, and then let a few only let a few flowers bloom instead of a million flowers. So yeah, again, just kind of like trying to sort of brainstorm, if you will, about like what's going on with the macro and why we should suspect certain things and not others. And even if this crash doesn't happen now, you can bet at some point there needs to be a consolidation of the AI companies. There needs to be a washout of the malinvestment that was spurred on by all the money printing. So yeah, okay. Bonds didn't actually do anything interesting. Like it may be slightly interesting. The long-term part of the yield curve went up. So like the 20-year, the 30-year, the 10-year, they actually spiked up, whereas the shorter-term bonds didn't go up at all. So if anything, the shorter-term bonds held flat. So I don't know. I guess maybe you could say people are getting out of long-term bonds and getting into short-term bonds. I don't exactly know how to interpret what's going on here. Why the yield curve there? I mean, it's closer. It's normalizing, right? That's a spike up in normalization. But at any rate, the yield curve did not have volatility, and particularly not towards the downside. So again, that would be a counterpoint towards the crash very, very soon thesis. that bonds are not responding in that way, right? But then again, maybe people prefer, maybe institutions will prefer to put money into the reverse repos, right? Perhaps they prefer to put their billions and billions into reverse repos where they can then immediately redeploy that capital, as opposed to having to get into bonds. Um, although, so if people thought, if institutions did think there was a big crash coming and that the Federal Reserve was going to have to lower rates soon, to rescue a crash, they would be buying long-term bonds, and these long-term bonds rates would be like falling right now. So it might be the case that institutional doesn't actually think that any macro crash is nearby, that any Fed intervention is nearby. Otherwise, you would expect to see these falling more towards the downside. So yeah, that's, again, it's a counterpoint towards the crash thesis, the fact that the bond market is not showing the kinds of downward volatility that we might expect. But it can happen quickly. It really can happen quickly. So anyways, I guess overall, I would say I don't expect the macro crash to begin in earnest next week, but it could. It could. We're basically in the window. It could happen. So I think basically the market's going to hold its breath and wait for Trump to say something on Wednesday, and then see where things go from there. That's probably like the best that we could say in the moment. So just don't be getting long with big leverage, right? That's mostly my advice there. Just keep your gold longs in play. We could get a little bit of bounce in Bitcoin here. I don't know for how long. And yeah, I guess that's about all I got. That's all I got to say about that, guys. Oh wait, no, there's one more thing. I want to show you the GDP. So we talked about this last week, where like they change the GDP numbers all the time. I guess they changed it weekly because now the GDP for last quarter is down to minus 2.86 or minus 2.8. Whereas last week when we talked, it was like minus 1 point something, like maybe 1.5. And the week before that, it was like minus 4. So this number apparently changes a lot. I guess they made some revisions to it. I don't really pay attention that much to how they revised the GDP, but I don't know. It seems somewhat comical, I guess. To me, it seems a little bit comical, especially in that day and age of all the digital stuff that we have. Like, are they not tracking everything digitally? Like, are they not surveilling your nutsack? And when you buy lotion, like, like, why do they have to change? Why would the GDP change by that much? Maybe reporting or something. I don't know. Whatever. Maybe they have to pretend that they don't see all that stuff. So they're like, they're like, oh, well, we only see X, and so, oh my God, this new thing, we have a new report. We have to adjust the GDP. They knew all along. They just have to pretend like they don't. I don't know. Whatever. That's just like rampant speculation on my part. All right, guys, I don't think I have anything else for you. Hopefully that's just some thoughts. Think about some things you can consider for your own investment decisions over the coming week.
We do got a few super chats. I will go ahead and pull these up. Anon tipped 6 cents. Even if ring sigs can definitely be reduced, the sender and receiver are still completely unknown. This still gives complete anonymity for the identities of the parties involved in the transaction. This is correct. Didn't you ask this last week? The answer was mostly yes. The sender and receiver are, for the most part, completely unknown. The concern comes into play if you've got some poisoned outputs, like if you've got some KYC outputs that they are actively tracing. But yeah, the ring signatures doesn't change the fact that you still have zero knowledge proofs being used to hide the amount through bullet proofs, and then you've also got the stealth addresses in play. So next, we've got a tip from a pseudo, tip 25 cents. He could help audit Monero's attributes and challenges his money. His expertise could help the Monero devs / community direct his souls for the best success and adoption. 4 out of 5. I don't.
Oh,
no.
Okay. Yeah, so if you go backwards here, his first one, I don't know if you can see it or not. Pseudo Zero said, I think it would be huge if Doug could get Jeff Snyder on as a guest. Yeah, okay. If Doug could get Jeff Snyder on as a guest. Channel is Eurodollar University. He has recently been talking about how Bitcoin has failed as money, but sees blockchain as the future. 1 of 5. Okay. Is there a character limit on XMR chat?
I have no idea, but sorry, pseudo, but all of your super chats look out of our order, and I don't see all of them. Sorry about that, but also 5 super chats is kind of insane.
I love it. I love it. Keep them coming. Keep the super chats coming.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
I love that people are using it so much right now.
MMG tipped 9 cents. Bonnie, have you seen that Space Weatherman moved up the expected timeline of the solar event Catastrophe, were you able to see any of the reasons and verify them? It seems like he uses weird extrapolations at times. Anyway, do you have any thoughts?
I do have thoughts. So I like that this guy, Benjamin, fuck, what's his name? I'm blanking on his name at the moment. Anyway, Space Weatherman, I do like that he brings this material to the forefront. He says, "Hey guys, there's really something going on here." I don't like his extrapolations either. I think like he's always like in the new Valley of the Sun, like in the presumption that basically New Mexico and Colorado are going to be this like new Valley of the Sun. Listen, guys, nobody knows. Nobody fucking knows if the Earth is literally going to flip on its side because of some sort of core mantle decoupling or mantle crust decoupling. Like we don't know. Like we have no way to. We have. There's just like no mechanisms for us to be able to have any reasonable idea of like where the new poles are going to be and how much the Earth is going to shift. What are the mechanisms that causes this to come undone? The ethical skeptic has some really cool material where he's saying, hey, you can actually see that there's like this exothermic process happening from the core right now. And you could do some modeling on the basis of the low velocity and different density province, I think they call it. I don't know why they call it a province, but maybe I have that terminology wrong. Anyways, in the mantle, there's this massive area of magma that's lower density, or maybe it's higher density. I can't remember. Anyways, it causes an asymmetry in the spin of the Earth. And hypothetically, if there was a decoupling there, then yeah, the Earth could flip over on its side. We look at the pyramids, we're like, holy shit, this is water erosion. This is wave action erosion over the course of like 50 to 100 years. And it's like one of the only things that could describe the calcium erosion and deposition at the bottom of the pyramids. And like it's crazy. The Earth has probably flipped over on its side in the past. We don't know when it's going to happen. It could happen in a few years. It could happen. It could be at the end of our lifetimes. You know, we might be old men by the time this actually happens. So I do like that Space Weatherman brings a lot of this like stuff to the forefront. The studies that I have seen in a lot of cases that it's only been a few of them, but the ones that I've gone and looked at and been like, okay, is this validated? Is this invalidated? He makes these extrapolations that the studies don't say. Like he'll say, this study says this. And it's like, it kind of says that, but not really, not in the way you're presenting it, bro. So yeah, just the people that are like telling you they know when it's going to happen and how it's going to happen and where the new polls are going to be, like they don't know that. Like they don't know that at all. And for the Christian inclined, you know, it's kind of like along the lines of no man knows the day and the hour. And no, you know, it's like there's this uncertainty. Like there's only one in heaven, right? The Father that knows. Not that I'm necessarily coming here from like the Christian perspective, but I think that if nothing else, like the Christian, the biblical, and other mythologies are instructive in certain ways that we can actually look at and if looked at in context. Anyways, the point is like, no, I think moving up the timeline is a bit silly. I'm not saying that he'll be wrong, but I'm just saying we don't know.
All right, and I think we have one more. Matuho Tep V tipped 25 cents. One on Cake Wallet. My fellow Egyptians agree that having the number of the last current block on the transaction section would be a nice feature. Rumor goes that bunker phones are made by XMR family members. What is this bunker phone? I feel like I may have heard of this before.
Yeah, we got to get somebody with knowledge on that to come up.
Is it just like a Graphene OS Pixel or something?
Because
that's honestly the most secure. That's really the most secure option.
Maybe it should be said, like, again, guys, there are no secure phones. There are no like open source manufacturing, Pine phone, whatever. All of it's insecure, horribly insecure. Your best bet, your absolute best bet, by
is to
far,
use Signal
is to use
on your
Pixel and Graphene. Like that's it. Like don't be foraying off into some new cool open source hardware phone, Librem, whatever. Like it's garbage. It's all garbage and insecure. It's hard. Like, it's really hard to get this stuff right. Just go with the
we
Pixel
need
Graphene.
JD Vance with the Graphene phone running Cake Wallet.
Please no.
And Signal, obviously, as well.
Well, clearly they're already using that, assuming that those leaks are even real and they weren't just put out there.
I know.
On
Yeah,
purpose.
we'll get to
It's
that.
like-
It's just like so weird. Oh, we accidentally added a journalist.
Oh. But I mean, at the same
Like,
time,
what the fuck?
at the same time, you know, the government can be very, 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 very incompetent. So it's not
Yes,
like
of
they're
course.
this impenetrable force of intelligence at all times.
Yeah, they're just yes. Well, I'm
They
sure
are
we'll get to all
autistic as
that.
well.
We'll get to all that.
All right. Thank you very much. But I think it's all the super chats. Oh wait, was this one already read? Oh yeah, that was already read earlier. Okay, I believe that was all
Who is
super
this
chats.
Jeff Snyder guy? Yeah, if Pseudo, if you want to grab his attention somehow, by all means, please do. I mean, I guess I could try. I don't know him though, Jeff Snyder.
I feel like I've heard his name before, but maybe I'm just hallucinating that.
Yeah, maybe it's like one of those. If you see him, you know him. Jeff Snyder, get him on.
I'll go check his stuff out. It sounds like he's a price guy. So.
All right. Shall we move into the new segment?
Let's do it.
So
all
long.
right. Thank you, Body, as always. Appreciate your insight.
Thank you, Buddy.
sirs.
Thank you, Buddy. Buddy, I don't think we got your full pyramid take from the last. Was the last show?
Pyramid?
Somebody
Yeah,
left a super chat. I think it was after you left, asking your opinion about the pyramid.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I kind of just covered it a second ago. So there's a guy named the Ethical Skeptic on Twitter, and it's like once you see it, you can't unsee it. I don't know if maybe I could pull it up. It might take too long. Keep the show moving, but yeah, effectively the pyramids show very, very clear water erosion, and I don't just mean rain. I mean the ocean was covering them, not covered, but like the ocean had almost covered the pyramids. There's like three parts. There's the bottom part where the ocean like effectively had covered everything, and you get this this dissolving of the I believe it's a calcium carbonate there, and then redeposits that at the base of the pyramids, and you can see that like again very clearly. There's this other parabolic wave action that happens in the middle portion where basically the pounding of the waves removed the most material. And you can see that especially at the corners where you get this parabolic wave action. So in other words, as a wave goes against the flat face of the pyramid, the corners actually rise up higher, and you can see that. And then at the top, you can see there's no water erosion, there's no wave action. It's just flat as if it had been weathered by wind and sand or whatever for thousands of years. And so once you see it, you're like, oh my God, that is that. And that would take 50 to 100 years for that to happen. So it means that salt water, ocean water, was the pyramids are like 138 meters high, at least Khufu, the highest one. It means that the oceans were like 100 meters higher, something like that. Maybe I'm getting the numbers slightly wrong. That's possible. But it means that the oceans were literally like halfway up the pyramids for a period of like 50 to 100 years. And there's no possible way that could happen other than like, I don't know, a comet striking Antarctica and knocking all the ice off. I don't know. Or if the earth flips over, like you just think like, how could that possibly have happened? And it's basically like, it's a kind of this verification in a way of the inundation stories that we've heard across the globe. It's like the most recent cataclysm that almost every single culture has. Like, it's not fire, it's not meteorites, it's not, they're all inundation stories for the most part. And so it's crazy because you look at it, you're like, wait a second. Is it possible that the Earth the pole actually flipped on its side? The Earth, no shit, the axis of rotation flipped 90 degrees or 100 degrees and then flipped back up. Like it seems like it's a crazy, crazy thing to say. But
how about
it seems possible.
well? How about the structures that have allegedly been found under the pyramids?
Oh shit, yeah, those two.
Yeah.
What?
I mean that screams like what Tesla had alleged, right? That these were devices, used for transmitting energy wirelessly. I mean, it looks like we're moving in that. That would be my guess, without knowing more at this point, which is pretty insane and crazy. But I don't know, buddy. What do you have to say? I mean, obviously, we don't even know if it's real yet. We don't even know if what they found is real.
Supposedly, this group has mapped out other structures successfully, like with reasonably high resolution. So supposedly, I haven't really dug into it for myself, but yeah, supposedly they've mapped out other underground structures that were then verified, and they've got like, I don't know, proprietary algorithms. And so, yeah, they're basically these huge columns extend 650 meters below the pyramids. And again, Khufu is like 138 meters tall. So you're talking literally like 5 times the depth of the pyramid. And so of course, like predictably 100% from the mainstream, they're going to try and debunk it and just dismiss it and be like, it's been debunked, right? So they're not actually interested in the truth of that. They want to hide that if it is true. It seems very plausible to me, and it would leave everything that they say in shambles. Like, if that's true, then you cannot say, it is impossible to say that some slaves stacked a bunch of blocks. They did not dig 650 meters into the ground and create hollow columns, that far down. It's just not possible with their technology. It's not even possible probably with our technology. So like, it just means that there was some entities, humans or otherwise, that built those things with technology that we don't have, that's far more advanced than our own, which is kind of what we already knew about the pyramids anyways. Like, people keep trying to deny that, but it's
Yeah,
like,
but if
nah.
this is now it's like there's no argument at this point. There's no
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
okay, well maybe they were just really dug for a long time. Like,
It's like Minecraft, just keep digging
I mean,
down.
wait, hey, buddy, but if you can remove your screen, I just want to add a photo
Oh, sure,
to the
yeah.
screen. Yeah, I mean basically what everybody's seen already, but it is pretty wild. Oh shit.
All right,
Sorry, I was doing it for you.
Okay. I mean, just to put things
Yeah.
into kind of that's just fucking sick.
And then allegedly those blocks at the bottom, they say that that goes down to a depth of 2 kilometers, that there's actually structures going down to a depth
Yeah,
of 2 kilometers.
yeah.
I mean, if nothing else, like, here's another sort of contextual point. I don't know if you guys heard about Göbekli Temple, or Göbek. I can't pronounce it. Göbekli Tempe, whatever. I think y'all know what I'm saying. It's this site in Turkey where these massive stones that predate anything of the megalith structures, or at least the alleged dating of the megalith structures that we have currently studied. These huge megaliths, rocks, are in this site. Well, there are other sites. All these other hills and mounds are either suspected or known to have more archaeologically significant findings there. And then they just planted a shitload of olive trees on top, because it's a crime to take out those olive trees to excavate the sites now. And they did that on purpose to try and obfuscate. And so again, you have to stop and say, okay, these guys want to obfuscate archaeology. Why? If they weren't afraid of what would be found there and be published about those sites, they wouldn't do that. They would be like, this is important for humanity. They wouldn't just plant a bunch of olive trees to make it a crime to actually go excavate now. They wouldn't try to cover that shit up. And, oh, by the way, the roots are probably going to destroy some of the rocks eventually. Like, they wouldn't do that. So they're hiding something from us. They're hiding our history from us. I think everybody on the show basically knows that, but just kind of
So
random.
do you think the pyramid, like when you look at even the evidence they have for that, when the Egyptians built these pyramids, it's not anything that strong. Like, they have records of them shipping the stone, right? Like, there was like a logbook found. I think that's like the strongest evidence of showing, when they were shipping the stone. But they could have very well just been like fixing the pyramids at that time, like adding stone to where it had fallen off, and these things are already, thousands of years old or whatever by the time they were. Like, do you think the Egyptians were involved in the building of the pyramids, or they're much older?
Almost
and
certainly no.
And they were just like utilizing the pyramids.
Yeah, almost certainly no. It's really, like, it's difficult to think that the Egyptians actually did that. A note about all of the radioisotope
Right, like I said,
dating.
there's no strong evidence of there's no like big book that was found as like, oh, where they're talking about the pyramids and how they built them. Obviously, no plans have ever been found, but the only thing they have is like a log book of like when they were shipping stone, but it wasn't nearly as much stone as needed to build the pyramids. It was just showing that they were capable of shipping some fairly large pieces of stone, but not impossible. But doesn't mean they built these things, right? Like, they could have just been adding to them or fixing them, or obviously if these things existed while they were around, they're going to be worshiping them in some fashion.
Yeah, I mean, humans definitely could move these stones, but these stones were being placed like once per second, allegedly, for like 30 years. Like, it's gonna be really hard. Like, how do you make that case?
So there was proof,
did that with such precision
like they show like
years?
the canal systems that existed, that they moved them, and but that doesn't mean they built these pyramids.
Another thing about radioisotope dating is that they don't take into account, like, none of that takes into account the potential deposition of radioisotopes from solar events, which happen with reasonable, like, frequency, regularity. and or if our solar system has wandered into dust clouds previously and magnetic flips, which we know happen again, like the Earth's magnetic field does flip. That's well acknowledged by science, and they've even acknowledged lately that hey, it could even happen within 100 years. It could probably happen sooner than that. I mean, not now, but like the magnetic flips can happen on the order of 100 years, of just 1 century. So like we can get radioisotope deposition of all kinds and disturbances to that from solar activity and dust activity falling onto Earth. And the radioisotope dating that's used to do a lot of this stuff doesn't take those things into account. So that's another little piece of question.
This is interesting, but I do have a special guest. It is Donuts, Waffles, and More.
Oh, he jumped on. All right. I had DM'd him.
And he sells fried donuts, waffles, corn, and coffee for crypto and Monero. And he lives in Jordan, so I'm gonna go ahead and run the guest segment.
Let's bring him up.
Thank you, Body, for doing the price report and talking about the pyramids. This is very interesting.
Thanks so much, Body. I will say, you know, like an idea I've been throwing around as a potential MoneroTopia was, this is before this latest pyramid stuff even came out, was to do something in Egypt or near Egypt, August 2nd, 2027 they're going to have a full blackout solar eclipse for like 6 minutes.
That's cool.
That would be freaking amazing.
I would go.
That would be so amazing.
100%.
And maybe we could do some exploration while we're there. Body, thank you so much, man.